Good morning and afternoon and evening, whenever it is you're taking in this Wednesday edition of Big Talk, college sports with a Midwest perspective, blue collar and blue blood. I'm Sam Sprunger, as always, joined by this guy right here, Tony Hollinsworth. Tony, how are we today?
Doing good. So this is going to be a little bit of a surprise to Sam. This might be a little bit off script, but I'm going to start my pitch now. We're gonna note this for January 15th, 2025.
Okay.
I want to pitch for the West Virginia Mountaineers to be absorbed by the Big Ten. Just saying.
And for this reason?
I mean, think about it. Geographically, it makes sense. We could then have country roads. Think of all the great matchups, all the great uniform combinations.
Penn State would finally have a rival to play on rivalry weekend.
Exactly. And to boot it all out, since we're going to be doing a basketball episode today, they have done absolutely great in beating 2 top 10 teams this season, and they face another top 10 team tonight against Houston, and they beat Kansas and they beat Gonzaga, and they're sitting there at 12-3. They're 4th in the Big 12 right now. I'm just saying, time for country roads to lead to the Big 10. Just throwing it out there. Starting a campaign today.
Them and Notre Dame at the same time make a cool 20.
Ooh. You know, I have done that in NCAA 25. Works out pretty well.
And added Notre Dame to the Big 10?
Yeah, so I did it a little bit differently. I tried to go more old school. I basically kicked all the Pac-12s out. I rebuilt the Pac-12. Pac-12's back again in my NCAA 25. But I brought in Iowa State.
Schools or different ones?
No, the actual schools and their new additions that they're adding. So like Boise State, Colorado State's all in there. But for the Big Ten, I added West Virginia, added Notre Dame, I did Iowa State. Felt like Iowa State needed to come back. Well, not come back, but they needed to have their for sure rivalry with Iowa. Got to have the Cyhawk.
Have that without even being in the conference, Mister.
I know, but hey, with all this conference realignment, we're losing rivalries. We got to keep them.
Get crazy with it, right?
We got to keep them how it is. Can't give up the opportunity. And plus, basketball wise, perfect addition. Look how good they're doing this year.
Well, crazier things have happened. You know, USC and UCLA and Washington and Oregon joined the Big Ten out of what seemed to be the blue.
Right.
So, absolutely not going to say it won't happen, but have you heard it?
Anywhere? No, it's absolutely nowhere. The likelihood of this is extremely impossible. Oh yeah, this is 1,000% me. Yeah.
Gotcha. Well, we're taking a little sidebar this Wednesday episode, and probably even Friday, to talk about some other things in the Big Ten Conference. We might talk Friday about some football and stuff, but
maybe
the full-fledged national championship preview will be Monday, the day of the game. So you'll get the most succinct and right up to the minute update, preview, I guess. I mean, we could do it like 10 minutes before kickoff, but that ain't happening. Sorry.
We could, but nobody, I'm going to be honest, nobody may or may not listen to that.
Yeah,
everybody's going to be watching the game.
Correct. So today we're going to talk about the hardwood. We're going to the men's Big Ten conference. The conference. They're in conference play now, full-fledged. Everybody's full in. Some have played 6, some have played 5, but for the most part, everybody's got at least 5 in to this point. And right now, one surprise maybe, and one not as surprising, but still not expected. Michigan State and Michigan both stand atop the Big Ten, 5-0 in the conference. Michigan State 14-2 overall, and Michigan 13-3. So they are 5 wins already, 5 wins over what they brought in all last year. Tony, either of these two, do you think they both are legit, or one or neither for the Big Ten title?
I think Michigan State is, and I think that's purely because of what we've seen out of Michigan State in the past. And I will say this Michigan State team seems a lot different than the Michigan State teams in years past. Sorry, you seem like
that was it.
Oh no! It seemed like
okay.
you had something to add to that. I was
Nope.
like, oh, he
Nope.
got
I'm
something.
letting you. I'm letting you say your piece right now, Mister.
But no, because I mean, when we looked at, when it was you, Dalton, and I, when we've looked at this Big Ten conference over the last few years, Michigan State, Purdue, Illinois has honestly kind of made the comeback up here the last couple of years, and then you could probably toss in Iowa and Indiana, and then obviously Wisconsin, I think, has to be mentioned in there too. Those were kind of your big rotating players for a lot of the Big Ten title, and I still think, even to this day, as it stands right now, if we're looking at who I truly think is a contender for the Big Ten title, you have to look at Michigan State, you have to look at Purdue. I'm going to say Illinois. Now, just because of their standings and where they're at right now and their overall record, I don't think we can dismiss Oregon and Wisconsin, but I think they are the legitimate ones. The only ones I feel that are honestly just exceeding expectations as it stands right now is Michigan. Like you said, they're 5 wins above than what they had 5 more wins this year than what they did last year. Now, some of that might be just purely a new coach, new culture as a whole. But again, we're still early and young into the season. We're not fully into everybody's going full speed. You still got time. If you make mistakes, you can still bounce back, rebound, and at least make your run for your conference tournament and whatnot, and even have a deep run there. So right now, I'm not seeing anything out of Michigan. And when you look at their schedule, their biggest, they have 3 wins against ranked opponents. Their biggest was at Wisconsin. They beat them 67-64. It's fairly impressive, but now Wisconsin has dropped down to, I believe, 24. And then they beat UCLA in UCLA just the other night, 94-75. So again, impressive, but it's nothing that really kind of sits there and tells me, oh man, you guys played a big boy in college basketball and to watch out for the Michigan Wolverines. So I see them as more pretenders than I do contenders for the Big Ten title.
What a difference a year and a different coach makes. And this is not to bag on the guy since he's already gone, but it kind of lends as to I never really was a big fan of Juwan Howard being the coach at Michigan anyways. He took over for John Beilein when he decided to go to Cleveland. Mm-hmm. And Howard was around and he was relatively successful, but honestly I think he kind of did that for a good portion of his career at Michigan on Beilein's roster.
Yeah.
Yes, he could recruit. Yes, he had Hunter Dickinson. Yes, he had his son. He had a lot of good players, but at the same time, you shouldn't go from Sweet 16, which he was the year before last year, mm-hmm. to 8 wins just losing Hunter Dickinson, essentially. Yes, there's going to be regression, just like Purdue. There's been some regression in the in what they are now. That's not to say that, but this is what I was getting at. Good coaches will regress some, mm-hmm. but will also recover and still have a successful season. Correct. In the fact that they have a winning record or they're in the tournament in some fashion or manner. Juwan Howard wasn't cutting it on his own. Mm-hmm. They just, once Hunter Dickinson and his son, what was it, Jet, left Michigan, they were 8 and 6 or something like that last year, 23, 26, somewhere in there.
Yeah, I think so.
I understand regression, but that was bad. They were bad. He had lost just the entire clubhouse, as they say. Yeah. But with Dusty May, I think they have the right man in place, mm-hmm. and he took FAU to the Final Four 2 years ago, and then took that into a job in Ann Arbor. His story period's really just he took the job at FAU without actually being on campus to look at the campus, mm-hmm. and he took the job, went to campus and saw the facilities for basketball and almost called to resign. But he decided to stick it out, and they got some new facilities, and then look what he did. He ended up going to the Final Four with them. He's a great coach, and so I'm not surprised that they're 13-3 or in contention at this point in the season. Do I think they're going to stay there? No, they're going to get beat by some teams, but I think your top three that we're looking at for the Big Ten, it's going to be Michigan State, Purdue, and Illinois. They've kind of proven now. Michigan may stick around, and they may shock the world, and they may be in there to where they're fighting for it. But I think Michigan State, Purdue, and Illinois. Now, it's not me being a homer for Purdue. They are legitimately one of the best teams in the Big Ten, and they're starting to get into a groove. They really are. Since they lost 3 out of 4 back in December, they've won 5 in a row, and it hasn't really even been close. Like, now granted, it's the likes of Toledo, Minnesota, Northwestern, Rutgers, and Nebraska. Okay, I get that, but they're blowing them out, and they're playing really convincing basketball. Now, when they get some deeper into their conference in the next few games, they've got a really pretty tough schedule coming up. They're getting ready to go to the West. Actually, they play tonight out in Seattle, and then on Saturday in Eugene. So those are not, for one thing, you're going West. Those are tough games to do because you're traveling 3 time zones. But they're not easy teams either. While Washington struggled in the Big Ten a little bit right now, they're still not a bad team, and we all know what Oregon is.
Yeah. Well, and I'll say this too, much to your point, and I don't think it was you being a Purdue homer by any stretch. Like you pointed out, good coaches regress, and you look at, what Curtis Painter has had.
They'll always recover from their regression. They'll have regression once they lose a major piece of their team, but they're still good enough coach to recover.
Exactly, and much to your point too, when you look at the Big Ten and the overall standings of where everybody's at, you can't knock the team that has basically ran through the Big Ten, at least for the last 3 years, really uncontested. Like, we've kind of talked about, we think maybe this team might give them a little bit of a
bit of a run for their money. Banked 3-pointer at Wisconsin from being a 3 straight Big Ten champion coming into the season, literally.
Right. But for all intents and purposes, even just during the regular season without the tournament, they absolutely ran through the Big Ten. Couple, maybe get a win here and there from a couple random teams, Rutgers and Piscataway, whatnot. But nonetheless, that's not a team that you can take lightly. And much to your point, when you have a team that's like Purdue or even like Michigan State, even if you lose a big time body like that, a lot of these rosters are typically really deep with talent. So yes, you're going to regress a little bit as you're trying to kind of figure out chemistry. Maybe you lose a couple more guys than what you expected to, whether it be to the draft, transfer, whatever. But like you said, eventually they start to come back. You start to rebound. You start to get in your rhythm, and you're fine. So I don't disagree. Like I said, I feel it's Michigan State and Purdue. I think Illinois is there. And like I said, you could maybe throw Oregon and Wisconsin in there just because of how Oregon has played this year. They've played really well. And obviously, historically, with how Wisconsin has played, I feel like I don't want to call them a dark horse team because they're almost always there, but I also feel that they're very occasionally a dark horse of, oh, yeah, Wisconsin here. Oh, crap, here comes Wisconsin.
I don't know that they've got what it needs to be right now. I don't know that they've got because there are some really good teams, and I think a lot of good teams are going to get beat by teams that maybe some would look at as, ooh, they probably shouldn't have lost that game. But you know what I mean? So, but that's what the Big Ten is, just like you said. Purdue going to Rutgers, not last year, but the 2 previous years were not good for Purdue. Last year they squeaked out a 1-point win with the reigning national player of the year playing, and the previous 2 years they were beaten once at number 3 and once as number 1. That's the Ron Harper half court jumper at the buzzer to win the game for Rutgers.
Yeah.
But I'm looking at the one thing about Illinois is, if you remember, and I've mentioned this maybe not to you, but might have been on my other show. Brad Underwood a couple years ago had what people thought was a really good team, and they got knocked out after one game at the Big Ten tournament, and they were talking to him, and he says, we still just got to gel.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there thinking, we're in March. You shouldn't still be waiting for your team to gel. That team constructed was very much like they had a lot of pieces that were brought in.
Yeah.
Last year, they had a lot of pieces that were brought in, but they were very successful. They got to the Elite Eight. They performed very well. This year, they've got a lot of pieces that were brought in. Brad Underwood likes to bring in entities that are known already, and what they seasoned veterans, I guess, a couple years in, and they he tries to put them together. Now, is this we got to wait for him to gel, or do we have last year's team? They're certainly showing that they've got a ton of talent. They really do. They've got a plethora of talent. 13-4, excuse me, overall. But I'm looking at the schedule. The 2-point loss to number one Tennessee.
Yeah. They absolutely blew out Oregon.
They beat Oregon by the most points ever as a top 10 team at home has ever lost by.
Yep.
Then 3 games later, they lose to USC at home. That's what I'm getting at. Is I don't know. I still don't know what Illinois is. I honestly might say Illinois over Purdue with Michigan State rather than Purdue and Michigan State battling out, because if I knew these guys were going to be as sure, I mean, they thumped the living daylights out of IU at Assembly Hall.
Yeah.
Like that was last night, 94-69. They thumped, and IU's been performing well, had been anyways.
Right.
And now they've lost 2 in a row. They went to Iowa City and got really just ransacked. And then they get beat by Illinois last night by 25 points at home.
35 points
or 35. 25.
25. You're right. I don't math. I don't math very well. I'm going to let the teacher do the math from this point.
That's all right. But I've seen already in the small amount of time after that Illinois game, there are people calling for Mike Woodson to be fired now. Like now.
Yeah. But I will say
Omar Abalo has been in and out, hasn't performed at times. So he's much like the Brad Underwood Illinois experiment. Like, you're bringing all these guys in, and some of them are doing all right. Others are struggling. I think Balo is one of those that he came in very highly touted. He's not performing to what people are expecting, and they are not happy with Mike Woodson.
Well, and I will say, I work with a couple of very diehard IU fans, and one of them,
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I work with a lot of Purdue fans too, but
good people, salt of the earth.
But no, she's huge in IU basketball, and she brought up a really good point. She's like, Mike Woodson is very much one of those. He's a part of the good old boys club that IU likes, and she's like, IU has not really recruited any actual homegrown talent as far as like big star players. And she goes, it's crazy because IU does have the money to go out and spend to get these recruits. She's like, but they won't do it. And believe me, they have been extremely frustrated with Mike Woodson. And her as an IU fan, she's like, I completely think he needs to go. She goes, I think once he took over the team, you notice a lot of these players, it seems like they don't necessarily want to play for Woodson. And it seems to be one of those, whenever basketball season starts, especially for IU, there's a lot of hype. There's a lot of, potential. There's a lot of get your hopes up, and then it's immediately dashed and they end up falling short. Now, last last couple of years, oh, well, they've had to go through Purdue. They had to go through, like you said, the reigning, top, NCAA basketball player of the year in Zach Edey. So that's kind of hard to overcome. But even then, like you said,
he did get winning over him. Not last year, but the year before they split.
Yeah. And looking at their schedule, so let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4. So all the way up, their last 10 games up until Iowa and Illinois, they won 9 out of 10 games. Their last loss was in Nebraska, and then they've lost 2 in a row since. Like that to me has a lot of questions. What does Indiana's identity look like? What can Mike Woodson do to potentially get this team turned around? Now, again, there's still a lot of time. It's not like they're sitting there in a bad spot. They're 13-5 right now, and like I said, it's still young in the season.
With
There's still opportunity.
Extremely ugly losses in a row, though.
Oh, 100%. But they really don't have to go into a tough part of their schedule until the end of this month, beginning of February, when they have to go to Purdue, they have to go to Wisconsin, they have to host Michigan, and then they have to go to Michigan State, and then they host UCLA, but then they have to host Purdue immediately after that. And then second to last game of the season, they have to go to Oregon. So, I mean, they do have a tough stretch ahead, but they do also have some very winnable games in front of them too, that they can take a couple of losses, and I don't think it's going to hurt them that badly.
Well, I'm not at all. I've talked to people. I have another show that I've been on that I've hosted, and it's an interview, conversational interview show, and I had Marvin Williams Sr. on.
Okay.
If you remember Marvin Williams Jr., he was the number 5 pick in the NBA draft, I think back in 06 or 05 or 06 out of North Carolina. And he was drafted by the Atlanta Hawks. At that time, the Atlanta Hawks were coached by Mike Woodson.
Right.
And this was right after they hired Mike Woodson that I was talking to him, and we were talking, and he says, "This is the worst hire IU could have made." And he says, "Let me tell you why." He said, "When my son was drafted, he was over 18, but he was barely 19, not even 19 by the time he was drafted."
Right.
And he said, Marvin came in, and Mike Woodson expected him to be already no development, just boom, you're the number 5 pick in the draft, you need to be that guy.
Right.
And did zero to develop him. And this is all from Marvin Sr. So this
his
is not
dad,
any of mine at all. And
right.
Yeah, and his dad, he said, "I saw that man ruin my son's career just for the fact that he would treat him like crap, talk him down in front of people during practices, and then not do a thing to try to develop him." I don't know that he's doing much of that at IU either, because look at the amount of money they spent to bring in people that were already developed at the college level.
Right.
And he's still struggling with them. And yes, they're 13-5. They're 8 games above. They still have a winning record, but it's not looking a lot better for them right now.
No,
it really is not.
Well, and just like a lot of, every school kind of has what they're good at in their specialty. If you're not good at football, typically you're a basketball school. If you're not good at either one of those, typically you're a baseball school. Some schools can do multiple. It depends on what you're at, what you're good at, whatnot. And if you look at IU, with the exception of this year having one good football season, IU is known for being a basketball school, and that's what most IU fans appreciate and want to be successful. It's that basketball program.
Yeah.
And I 100% agree. If that's how he was doing, now keep in mind, this was also, 20 years ago when he did it. So maybe he's changed, but
appear he has.
I say, like you said, it doesn't appear that he has. And it would make a lot of sense too, if some of these young, very talented recruits are coming out of high school, because you have to think for a lot of these kids, if you've already put that work in the goal in, okay, what can I do to better myself, to put myself to the next level, to elevate myself, to get ready to go into the pros? And if I'm thinking, okay, well, what if I go to IU and I sit down and I talk to Mike Woodson, And it's like, okay, well, what are you going to do to like get me to that point? And he's like, oh, you just got to come in ready. Like, don't get me wrong. You can come in with pure raw talent and you can do some cool things, but you're not going to reach the maximized potential of what you could if you were to actually be honed and developed like you should be.
Yeah, and again, not draw a bag on the man. I don't care. I honestly, as a Purdue fan, want him to stay there so he can keep, just burying IU. But you know what? That's you get what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Michigan State just real quick. We've got about a minute and a half to talk about it. They've got Penn State tonight at home at 7:30 on the Big Ten Network. Not talking about that one, although you can't overlook the Nittany Lions, because on Sunday they host the number 19 Illinois Fighting Illini at noon on CBS. Tony, this is going to be an interesting kind of pacing of those two teams. I think, yes, we're at the Breslin Center, but your best 30 seconds on what you think that Illinois-Michigan State game is.
I mean, I think it's going to be close. I do like the fact that so far this year, Michigan State has really cleaned up the thing that has been, to me, their boogeyman for honestly the last 4 or 5 years has been the penalties and the fouls. Like it seems like whatever Tom Izzo has decided to do, he went back to the drawing board and said, look, we have to be better about not hurting ourselves. We have too much talent, too much potential to be doing this. And it definitely seems as though they've cleaned that up. As of this morning on the 15th, the ESPN predictor has Michigan State 60% chance of winning. I feel like that's not too far. Now, I do think it will be closer than that. I think it'll be a close game. Now, Michigan State's benefit, it is in the Breslin Center. They're 8-0 this season at home, so I think that will play a big factor. Much to your point, what is Illinois' identity, whereas I think Michigan State has their identity figured out. And if they don't, I think Tom Izzo will get that corrected, and I think he capitalizes on Illinois' search for their own identity.
One thing that the rest of the Big Ten needs to be aware of: Tom Izzo is 5-0 and 12-3 overall, or 12-3 overall in the, or 14-2. Sorry, not 12. I was looking at the wrong, but 14-2 overall and 5-0 in the Big Ten.
Yep.
Be scared of what's happening because his teams normally get better in March. So that kind of just wraps up where we're kind of talking in general about the Big Ten. We didn't cover most of it because there's so much. So maybe we talk a little bit more about it on Friday as well, Tony, and talk about the Big Ten and see what the others are doing. But for now, why don't you tell everybody where they can find us?
You can find us on Facebook at B1G Talk. That's Big Talk with a 1 instead of I. You can also find us on Instagram, X, and currently, as we still have it, TikTok at B1G_Talk. And I'll probably have to watch the Michigan State game for sure when they get rid of TikTok on that Sunday. I'll have nothing else to do. What else will I have to do with my phone while I'm in the bathroom? I can't scroll TikTok.
Well, the TikToks has been good to you.
Right. You can also find us 3 times a week on the All Sports All Plays network that you can also get on whatever app store you have, because that app isn't going away. We're keeping that app. And you had best believe that when Sam gets the opportunity, he will upload all of these episodes to not only the Believe network, but also the Lounge Sports network as well.
It'll be out right after this episode, about 20 minutes.
There we go. And you can catch us wherever you get your podcasts at.
All right. Well, thanks, Tony, and thanks everybody for stopping in and checking out Big Talk College Sports with a Midwest perspective, blue collar and blue blood. For Tony Hollinsworth, I'm Sam Sprunger. We'll see you Friday. Thanks.